The Law School Admission Council just launched a new $99 application coaching service called App On Track, rolls out June 1st, just a couple of weeks. This is the first time that the organization that owns the LSAT has sold direct coaching on how to get into law school. And the more I looked into it, the more concerning it got. There are a couple of things in their fine print that most people skip past. There's also a federal antitrust lawsuit running in the background, and the financial setup behind this whole thing should change how you think about every LSAC product going forward. Now, a lot of people are about to spend $99 on something they don't fully understand yet. Here is what you actually get. It is a self-paced checklist with reminders. There is a downloadable application timeline. You get optional weekly Zoom hours with LSAC facilitators and modules on personal statements, resumes, references, addenda, and some LSAT study tips. So in real terms, it's a to-do list with a calendar and some optional office hours. There's no one-on-one support, no direct personal statement feedback, and definitely no resume review from a human who's actually read 10,000 of them or more. That is the whole product. And look, I mean, $99 for a structured to-do list isn't outrageous. There are plenty of productivity apps out there that maybe even cost more. The question is whether this specific $99 is worth it for you. There are a couple of problems here. First one is no refunds. This is straight from their FAQ. Quote, if you choose to cancel App On Track or your access to App On Track is terminated by us, you will not be entitled to a refund. So there are no refunds, period. You pay June 1st, you log in, decide it's not for you, you're out 99 bucks. And there is plenty of free LSAT prep there already. For example, my videos on YouTube. Most consultants give you a free intro call. I actually give everybody who wants it a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. And so LSAC here, they're selling a digital self-paced course with a refund policy stricter than a Spirit Airlines basic economy ticket. That's issue number one. Issue number two, they've got some scarcity in their marketing. They're saying capacity for 2026 is limited. The FAQ actually repeats this. So their whole pitch here is urgency. And I mean, look, it's a digital self-paced course. There's no classroom that you got to go to. There's no ratio issues with instructors versus students. The idea of there being limited capacity on an asynchronous digital product is purely marketing, in my opinion, at least. It's not a real constraint. They could serve everybody if they wanted to for free, but they're choosing not to. I'm not saying they're evil, of course. I think maybe they're just trying to work out the kinks before they roll it out bigger, but you shouldn't let that scarcity push you into buying it faster than you should. Now think about who LSAC actually serves. I've spent more time than I should have over the years browsing around LSAC's website, and most applicants only see one side of LSAC. On your end, you take the LSAT, you pay them to register for credential assembly service as well, and then every time they send your file to a law school. If you apply to 10 law schools, you've handed LSAC roughly $665 before you've even opened a law school textbook. But here's the side of LSAC you don't see. They sell just as much to law schools as they sell to applicants, maybe even more. They've got a consulting arm called Legal Education Consulting. You could read about it on their website. They sell marketing, enrollment modeling, and staffing to admissions offices. They also license enrollment management software to law schools called LSAT Unite. And the candidate referral service is LSAC repackaging your information, your contact details, and selling it to law schools as recruitment leads. That's all the spam emails you're getting from law schools right now. Then every spring, LSAC hosts what they call, quote, the event admissions professionals look forward to. So this is their annual conference where every admissions dean in the country shows up on LSAC's dime. And none of this is hidden. It's all on their site under resources for law school deans. So imagine this, LSAC sells you the test, they sell you the application platform, and now they're selling you coaching on how to get past admissions. Meanwhile, on the other side of that same transaction, they're selling those admissions offices the software, the data, and the conferences to help them do their jobs better. So LSAC is selling jerseys to both sports teams here. Now, LSAC's Board of Trustees is composed entirely of people employed by member law schools. The 197 or so ABA-approved law schools that depend on LSAC's platform are the ones running LSAC. So member schools elect the trustees, then they get the platform at no charge. And the pricing you pay runs through that same board. Then there is the recent antitrust lawsuit alleging anti-competitive conduct under the Sherman Antitrust Act. They called it a pay-to-play scheme. And of course, LSAC is denying the allegations here, and there are questions whether they are actually monopoly given the GRE, for example. The federal judge did dismiss the original complaint in April, but gave the plaintiff time to refile, so this case may continue. But bottom line, LSAC has been formally accused in federal court of anti-competitive conduct in the law school admissions market. And so pulled together here, LSAC is structurally controlled by the law schools. Those same law schools buy products from LSAC. The applicants who want to be considered by those law schools pay fees to LSAC, and now LSAC is selling those same applicants $99 coaching on how to do it better in the admissions process that LSAC itself administers. So there is a structural conflict here in terms of the math. Now, think about what $99 is actually getting you. Of course, there are many more expensive admissions consultants charging hundreds of dollars an hour, selling you full service packages for thousands of dollars. And so at $99, they're not really trying to compete with that. Consultants, they're competing with free information like YouTube and podcasts and pre-law advisors. Of course, you've got my YouTube channel for free, but you got my podcast for free as well. Where consulting actually pays off is the element of human support that App On Track isn't giving you. It's not giving you personalized answers to your specific situation or giving you a real person reading your actual essays. And so if the value of App On Track is structure and reminders, you're better off just setting up a Google Calendar for yourself. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. Those of you who end up trying it out, let me know how it goes. If you are in the situation where you are applying this cycle, you're disorganized or you're short on time, you've got no one supporting you, you want someone to hand you a plan, maybe it's worth it for $99. But for everyone else, I'm not so sure. If you've already got an admissions consultant and you can afford premium support, you don't need this $99 thing. And if you're not applying this cycle or you want to do it yourself, you've got plenty of free resources out there, including my YouTube videos. I'm happy to help you out. And if you haven't yet hit your goal LSAT score, definitely don't focus on admissions yet. A few more points on your LSAT's worth way more to you than a checklist of admissions ideas. And so if it were me, I wouldn't buy On Track. I'm not saying it's a scam. I don't think it is. I just think that there's a more comprehensive version of this product available for free online through YouTube and podcasts and such. And then if you really want hands-on support, they're not giving you that anyway. And of course, if you'd like my help, if you're looking for support, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. I'm happy to answer any and all questions, anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. Feel free to drop your questions. I'll get to as many as I can. I see Armani's asking, how much does your resume matter as a non-traditional student, especially if you've got a 3.0 GPA? So the longer you have been out of undergrad, the less your GPA matters and the more your LSAT score matters, because the longer it's been since you earned the GPA, the less relevant they're going to consider it, the more they'll devote attention and energy and weighting to your LSAT score and your work experience. So I think about it more like the GPA diminishes in importance, the LSAT score increases in importance, because ultimately admissions for law school is numbers driven. It's LSAT, then GPA, then everything else. And so you could say that, yes, work experience will matter more than it would have otherwise, but still work experience is not a quantitative metric. It's not a number. And law schools care a great deal about numbers because US News does. And what happens is law schools report their LSAT and GPA medians to the American Bar Association. US News in turn then pulls that data from the ABA for inclusion in the US News rankings. And so law schools care a great deal about the rankings because that's how they increase their prestige and attract more applicants for the future. And it's also how they attract more donations from their alums. And of course, your GPA is what it is at this point. You can't change it, especially if you're done with undergrad, but your LSAT score you can improve significantly with time through putting in the work. There's plenty of LSAT test dates coming up. You've got the LSAT coming up in June in just a few weeks. I wouldn't cram it for that, of course, but beyond that, you've got August, September, October, and November. You could take any of those LSATs. You could take all of those and apply pretty early in the cycle. Now I see Naval's asking about, what about GPA from grad or post-grad programs taken more recently? So fun fact, or maybe not so fun, but a true fact, law schools don't consider graduate or postgraduate GPAs. So in other words, your master's or PhD programs, what have you, they're not going to count. Of course, they will see that as context, like a soft factor, but they're not inputting that into their calculations because LSAC doesn't consider those GPAs when calculating your GPA for admissions purposes. And so if you've got it, of course, they'll see it, but they're not going to input that number into their formulas. Only the undergraduate GPA counts. And so if your undergraduate GPA is not what you would have liked it to be, you can still offset that with a higher LSAT score. I see Anas Saldib is saying, I got a 248 GPA, got ADHD. Do I have a chance? I mean, your GPA is relatively low, unfortunately, just being straight about that. But the biggest piece of the puzzle that we don't know for your candidacy, for your chances, is your LSAT score. If you can get a sufficiently high LSAT score, you can do a lot to offset a relatively lower GPA. And of course, there are GPAs that are sufficiently low that it would be an auto deny for a top 14 law school. But of course, not everybody has to go to a top 14 law school. If you can get a 175 plus LSAT score, you can still get into a good law school even with a lower GPA. I see Dom is asking, I got a 155 on my first diagnostic without studying. Is that a good starting point? Yeah, I mean, it's above average. I mean, the typical starting or median starting LSAT score is around a 151, 152. I personally started off at a 152 and ended up at a 175. It took me an entire year, though, and at least half of that was a complete waste of time. If I'd done it properly, I could have gotten it done in just a couple of months. And so know that you can improve your LSAT score significantly no matter what your starting point is. All a low diagnostic tells you is that you have not yet learned the language of the LSAT, but of course, you can over time. So use it as fuel, use it as motivation to put in the work. And then we look at, what are your goals? What's your time frame? In other words, what would you like to achieve on your LSAT, and when are you planning on taking it? I see you're taking it in September, next September. So you've got over a year. Over a year is plenty of time to make literally anything happen. I mean, even in just 3, 4, 5 months, you can improve significantly. And so if you're looking for support, of course, I've got plenty of free stuff available to everybody watching this now or later. Aside from the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast, I've also got a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. It's a quick reference guide covering everything in logical reasoning and reading comprehension, all the different sections, all the different question types. In logical reasoning, for example, you've got 15 different types of logical reasoning questions like strength and weaken, flaw, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, and so on. Then there's reading comp, of course. And so in this free guide, the free cheat sheet, I cover all of it and more. Again, you can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. The link is below the video, pinned in the chat as well. I've also got a free LSAT tutoring lesson I'm offering for everybody. During those tutoring lessons, we look at where you're starting, what your goals are, what your time frame is, and we map out an action plan to get you from here to there over that time frame. If you're taking the LSAT in just a couple months, we'll take a more intensive boot camp style approach with live coaching 5, 6, 7 days a week. If you've got a longer time frame, we'll take a more slow and steady approach, maybe just once or twice a week. We always adjust the plan to your schedule and your other obligations, so we could always talk through that more on a call. I see Navi Wins asking, I got accepted into the University of Chicago. Is that a prestigious undergrad that'll help me? So yeah, of course, I mean, UChicago is a fantastic undergrad. It's definitely a top-ranked university. And so if you got in there, it's certainly worth considering going. I don't know what your other options are, but UChicago is a great undergrad, of course. In terms of will it help with law school admissions, that's a different story. I mean, law schools don't really care that much about the prestige of your undergrad because they are not evaluated on the basis of that metric. So look at it from their perspective in terms of incentives. Law schools don't need to rely on the prestige of your undergrad because they have more recent and actionable metrics they can use to determine your chances. For example, your LSAT score and your GPA. Not saying don't go to UChicago for undergrad, but think about if law school is truly what you want to do. Do you want to save some money on undergrads and go somewhere cheaper so you're taking on less debt if you would need to take on debt? So something to think through, but regardless, UChicago is a great school, and I probably wouldn't turn it down depending on what the other options are. I see Gio's asking, do you recommend St. Mary's Law School in San Antonio? So St. Mary's is noteworthy because they're one of the only 100% online law schools. And so usually when people bring them up to me, it's because of their online option, not because of the law school in general. And so if you want to go to law school 100% online, you don't want to have to commute somewhere to law school or relocate for law school. It's certainly worth considering. But do keep in mind that it's quite competitive to get in there because there are very few totally online law schools. And so the requirements to get into their online program are higher than to get into their in-person program. So just keep that in mind. But I don't know more about the law school than that. If you want to evaluate any law school and say, is this a good law school or a bad law school, look up their ABA 509 reports, look up their bar passage rates, also look up their employment outcomes and see how many of their graduates have a job that requires a JD, how many of their graduates pass the bar in the first attempt. Those are things worth keeping in mind. I see Becca's asking about pricing for the tutoring. So we customize every program for the student. It's not a one size fits all. We look at where you're currently at, what your goals are, what your time frame is, and we then customize the degree of support and the components of the program to maximize the likelihood of your getting to your goal over that time frame. Someone who is taking the LSAT sooner or is taking the LSAT with lower goals will need less support perhaps than someone who's aiming for a higher score. So we always want to personalize the recommendation. And so the best way to figure out what the best option is for you would be to jump on a free tutoring lesson call with me. We could talk through the particulars. The link to book that lesson is unpluggedprep.com/start. Just scanning through other questions here. How long does it take to go from 145 to 170? Depends. I'll give you the very annoying lawyerly answer. It depends. It depends on how many hours you can put in per day and per week. It depends on the kind of support and resources that you're using. Of course, aptitude does play some role, probably not as much as the support and the time that you're putting in though, but I'm just being real, that is a factor as well. So we want to look at how many hours can you study and what kind of support are you getting. If you're just using ChatGPT and a practice test or two, that may not be enough. If you're using the official LawHub practice test and you're not using AI and you're not using an AI generated textbook, but you're rather getting some personal coaching, it's going to be easier because when you're on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some personal support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost and there's a lot of low hanging fruit. And so if you want some support on that journey, a good starting point would be the free LSAT cheat sheet I put together. You can grab it through the link in my bio. Max is asking, is LawHub good? So for those who aren't aware, LawHub is the LSAC platform with the official LSAT practice tests. There are 59 numbered exams on there, numbered 101 to 159. That is the best source of official LSAT material and the best place to take practice tests as well because their software reflects the actual test day experience. If you're using a prep book or you're using AI or using some third-party platform, then you're not getting familiar with the software, the interface, the functionality that you're going to be experiencing on test day. And one of the reasons that student scores often drop from the practice to the actual is because they're not properly simulating test day conditions. And so definitely use LawHub and use the practice tests in there as well. I see Troy is asking, how would you recommend studying for reading comprehension? I understand logical reasoning, drilling, and reviewing, but what works best for reading comp? And so this is the problem with students who are just using drilling apps is that they're not spending enough time on reading comp because reading comp is not as easily drillable since the passages are longer. But doesn't mean you shouldn't study reading comp. It is still an entire third of the test. But first I want to say, stop doing LSAT questions on your phone, do them on the computer because that's what test day is going to be like. It'll be on a computer on test day. And for reading comp, treat it like a big logical reasoning passage where you just need a bit more time to sit down and get into it. As an exercise, I would often recommend sitting down, reading a passage, then articulating or pre-phrasing, putting into your own words, what is the main idea? What is the author's opinion? What is the primary purpose of the passage? If they could leave you with only one central main idea, what would that be? Like, what's their thesis statement? What's their main conclusion? Then you try to knock out and solve only the main idea questions. And there are approximately 400 real official previously administered LSAT reading comprehension passages. I'm explaining every single one of them on my YouTube channel for free. I've already released dozens of them already. I'm continuing to create more. So you can go on there if you want breakdowns of the structure of the reading comp passage. But it's not fundamentally different from logical reasoning, just takes a bit more time. Sleep is asking, any advice if I have a lot of time on my hands? I love the LSAT, so I want to study for it for a long time. I mean, the benefit of studying for a longer time frame is that you're likely to hit a higher score. The truth is that most people who get 175 plus aren't cramming the LSAT in 1 or 2 months. They're giving it a bit more time to achieve their fullest potential. And so if you have more time, you're in a great position. I would say you then would likely want to work through the vast majority of previously administered LSAT exams. I mentioned earlier there are 59 of them on the LSAC LawHub platform. There are others available as individual sections and drill sets. In total, you've got roughly 8,000 LSAT questions available to you, and I would say you want to work through the majority of them. The idea being that the more you can expose yourself to the tricks and the traps and the patterns of the test, the more easily you will be able to spot those tricks and traps and avoid them. And we divide LSAT prep into 5 major phases using the LASER approach. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. So learning is the foundational phase, getting a proper understanding of the different sections and the different question types. A is for accuracy, drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Then you've got S for individual sections, working on pacing and time management. E is for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed exams, and R is for review, which should be, of course, incorporated throughout your study process. Now, if you've got a shorter time frame, but you're taking it in, say, August, and you've got 4 to 8 hours a day, as I see a follow-up comment about that, I typically wouldn't recommend putting in more than 5 to 6 hours a day because we don't want you to burn out. LSAT prep is a marathon, not a sprint. So I'd say if you're studying essentially full-time over the course of 2 to 3 months, you could probably do 2 timed exams a week, review them in depth as well, once you've built that strong foundation. And if you want to talk through what your study plan could look like, you can book the free tutoring lesson with me and we can talk through it more. The link to book that free tutoring with me is in my bio, and we'll map out an action plan for you. I see a question here around applying with a 3.8 GPA, 172 LSAT, but recently got my 3rd DUI. Okay, so GPA is pretty good. LSAT score is pretty good as well. Great, in fact. The 3rd DUI is, of course, a red flag. The fact that it's the 3rd one is the part that would give me an admissions officer's pause. It's like the question becomes, has this person learned from their mistake? Because this is the 3rd time that they've gotten caught. Has it happened more times where they didn't get caught? And so you're probably going to need to disclose that in a character and fitness statement. For those who are not aware, a character and fitness statement is a disclosure that you need to write about on your law school application. Law schools will typically ask, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been convicted? Is it a misdemeanor? Is it a felony? The questions vary school by school because different state bar associations have different questions when you go before the bar. And so the questions on the law school application are parallel to the ones that you'll get after you finish law school. And so you want to err on the side of answering honestly, being forthright, disclosing when in doubt. You can also consult an admissions counselor or an attorney to guide you on how to answer those questions properly. Of course, you don't need to over-explain, but you do need to be honest. And overall here, the point is you want to address any questions admissions would have. You don't want to leave them with unanswered concerns. And so the question they're going to be asking is, what have you learned from this experience? How can we be confident it's not going to happen again? And when it's the 3rd one, they're going to want a pretty thorough explanation, more so than if it were, say, the 1st time. So how have you learned and grown from this, and what steps have you taken to ensure it's not going to happen again? Hope is asking, what percentage of people get everything covered and truly don't pay anything for law school? So fun fact, you can actually look this up for any given law school in the American Bar Association 509 report. They have on there details about the scholarship offers that each school is giving out. In other words, different law schools are differing in their generosity in terms of how much scholarship money they give out to applicants. Fun fact, Harvard Law and Yale Law both do not give any merit aid, period. They do give need-based financial aid, but not merit-based. And so need-based would be based on your income, on your tax filings, for example, your tax returns. But for merit aid, that's based on the strength of your numbers relative to their medians. And so the more you are above their LSAT median and their GPA median, meaning the stronger your numbers are relative to last year's entering class, the more likely they are to give you significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. And so for any given law school that you're targeting, look up what kind of scholarships they give out. Are they conditional or unconditional? What percentage of applicants lose the conditional scholarship after year one? Those vary a lot. I've done some videos on that recently as well. You can look up on the YouTube channel talking through which law schools take away the most scholarship money, which is, of course, concerning. You don't want to have your scholarship rescinded or taken away from you based on your GPA being relatively lower. And so it varies. I'd say look up for any individual school that you're considering. See a question asking, any tips for splitters, 3.0 GPA to be specific? Okay, so the first thing, I'll just stop there for a second. I mean, if you're a splitter and your GPA is low, the first question is, are you truly a splitter or do you just have a low GPA? In other words, is your LSAT a done deal yet? Have you taken it? Have you gotten a higher score to compensate? A splitter, for those who aren't aware, is the term for applicants with a relatively lower GPA and a relatively higher LSAT score. And for most folks, the GPA is typically pretty fixed in this point by the time that you're looking into law school. But of course, if you're still an undergrad, keep focusing on classes, raising up your GPA. If the GPA is a totally done deal, though, then of course you want to switch your focus to the LSAT, and you can offset a lower GPA with a higher LSAT score. And so until you've hit a really high LSAT score, I'd say don't even think about the other parts of the application. Just get that LSAT higher and higher. Retaking is totally fine. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year, so every month or every other month or so. And law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores, but rather they only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. And so for that reason, there's not really a downside to retaking the LSAT. If you have a lower score, just retaking at a higher score. And if you don't succeed, you just try again and again. And of course, there's a limit, of course, and there are retake limits as well, but most folks don't run into those. Just scanning through for other questions here. Dilraj is asking, can you give insights about international applicants? Okay, so for international applicants, the fun fact is that if you earned your bachelor's degree outside the US, law schools will not consider your GPA because they don't know or understand how to interpret your undergraduate transcript, and they couldn't be bothered to figure it out, especially when there's translation issues with different languages. And so they will look at your transcript, but they're not going to try and do mathematical calculations in terms of your grades, which is on the one hand kind of crazy to me, but on the other hand, there's like 200 countries in the world and many, many languages, and it's a lot for them to parse through. So they just basically don't calculate your GPA, and instead they place more weight on your LSAT score to compensate. So for international students, if your GPA was low, good news, you've got plenty of room to boost up your odds by getting a higher LSAT score if your GPA was high. That's bad news because it doesn't factor in, unfortunately. But regardless, there is a lot of room for you to move the needle in terms of increasing your odds of getting in and also getting scholarship money through having a higher LSAT score. If you are a non-native English speaker, they're of course going to also maybe give a bit more additional weight to the strength of your application essays and your LSAT writing sample. And more so on the writing sample because, of course, they'll know that for your essays, you could have used AI to help you with them. You could have used an admissions consultant to help you with them. But the LSAT writing sample, although it's unscored, is the only truly unfiltered look they have at your writing ability. without the chance of anybody having helped you. And so that'll be their way to gauge your fluency and your writing ability. I see a question about scholarships. So for law school scholarships, really, I mean, there are external third-party organizations that will give you a little bit of money here or there. But for the most part, law school scholarships are given by the law schools themselves based on the strength of your application and your numbers. And so if you could hypothetically apply to a law school where your LSAT and your GPA were both above the 75th percentile of the schools that you're targeting, you're pretty likely to get some really serious scholarship money because you're going to help that school boost up their rankings in US News. You're going to help them boost up their prestige, and they're going to reward you for that by giving you money to incentivize you to choose their law school in particular over others. By the way, welcome to those just joining. For those who aren't aware, I do these live streams on LSAT and law school admissions every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way these grow is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost these because they can't run ads during a live, and LSAT and law school is kind of a niche topic. So if you could share this to your socials on TikTok or Facebook groups, Discords, I do appreciate the support. I'm just scanning through for other questions I may have missed. Meg is asking about LSAT necessary assumption questions. So for those who aren't aware, on the logical reasoning section of the LSAT, there are approximately 15 different types of questions, including necessary assumption, inference, and flaw being the 3 most common types of logical reasoning questions. And there's a lot of confusion around necessary assumption because there's also sufficient assumption. People conflate the two or lump them together. A necessary assumption question is a very specific kind of must-be-true question. The LSAT is asking what needs to be the case in order for the argument to work. Meaning, if that were not the case, what would happen? And the correct answer choice, when negated, destroys the argument. So you ask yourself for each choice as you're running through it, does this need to be true? If it weren't true, what would happen? So you want to get really good at negating logical reasoning questions. And in a lot of my TikTok videos and IG Reels and YouTube Shorts, I actually have a lot of LSAT drills that I publish there where I walk through as an exercise, how do you negate a given statement? So those are like mini questions, isolating a single sentence. How do you logically negate a statement? Not what is the polar opposite, but what is the logical opposite? So the opposite of all, the logical opposite of all is not all rather than none. So you want to get good at negating statements. And if you can negate statements, you'll be better able to interpret and evaluate whether a statement is the logical opposite or not. And that'll help you figure out whether a statement is truly necessary or not. That's the quick version. I have plenty of YouTube videos walking through this with example after example you can find on the YouTube channel, LSAT Unplugged, linked in my bio. And I also walk through this on the LSAT cheat sheet a little bit as well, which you can grab through the link to my bio also. Feel free to keep the questions coming. Ask anything else that comes to mind. I'll get to as many as I can. I see It's You Boy Habibi's asking, what if I got a full ride to Vanderbilt for undergrad? Should I choose my state school because I'll get a higher GPA? That's a difficult question. I can't give you the answer on what you should do. I can raise some considerations for you to think about, but I'm not going to prescribe a life advice on really significant decisions like where to go to college to a stranger based on a single comment or two on the TikTok live. But I'll give you my thoughts to make of them what you will. Vanderbilt is a top-tier university. If you got a full ride to go there for undergrad, I'd probably take it because you don't know that you're going to end up going to law school. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. If you're still choosing undergrad, I'm guessing that you're not yet in undergrad, and so law school is still 3 to 4 years away, if not more. And I'm always about keeping your options open, maintaining open possibilities for where the directions life may take you. And so if you could go to Vanderbilt for free, I wouldn't choose a state school just because you might get a higher GPA there. In fact, Surprisingly, the opposite is often true. In fact, for those who aren't aware, there's a ongoing national conversation and scandal around grade inflation. A lot of elite universities actually inflate grades more than state schools do. And so it may be that Vanderbilt, being a top tier school, being a more elite university, may actually be more susceptible to grade inflation than a state school would. And so as a result of that, you could go to Vanderbilt with a full ride and still get a super high GPA, in part because of the grade inflation. Additionally, if your concern is really just getting high grades, there are ways you can strategically choose certain majors, certain classes, certain professors where you are more likely to get high grades. And I hate the idea that you would go to college and just choose classes and majors based on getting an easy A. But if you are solely concerned with law school admissions, and that's what you are certain you want to do, there is an argument to make to say, hey, choose the easier A classes. Because if you don't, you're going to get punished, and there are competitors, other applicants who are applying with 4.0s and 3.9s because they went that route. So don't design your entire life around law school admissions or getting a high GPA, but I think that if you want to keep your options open in life in general, then you would want to go to the better university, especially if you could go there for free. So I would take the full ride in the short. So I am actually going to give you advice on this one. Go to Vanderbilt if you can. Anirudh's asking, reverse splitter here with a 163 LSAT and a 4.0 GPA from a state school. What schools are in range? Well, there's 200 or so ABA law schools in the US. I don't pretend to know all of their stats individually. You can look up the stats yourself for any given law school on lsd.law, for example, or the official LSAC website, and they'll tell you your chances at every single law school based on those stats. But whenever I encounter a reverse splitter like yourself, my answer is the same, really. It's, okay, well, you've got a great GPA. Why wouldn't you want to match it with a killer LSAT? Like your LSAT score is subpar relative to your GPA. Would you consider retaking the LSAT, bumping it up 5-10 points? If you could bump it up even just 5 points or 7 points so that you have the optics of a 1.70 versus a 1.6 something, you're going to get into way better law schools. You'll also get way more scholarship money. And so if you've got it in you to study for a retake, it's worth it. And the LSAT's offered every month or every other month or so beyond June, which is very soon, of course. You've also got the August LSAT in about 2.5 months. So why wouldn't you retake it? Your retake prep could involve as little as one timed practice test a week and reviewing it in depth. So in other words, as little as 5 to 10 hours of studying a week. If that could get you 5 more points on your LSAT, we're looking at, say, an average of, let's just say, to keep it simple, 7 hours a week over the course of 10 weeks, 70 hours of studying. If those 70 hours could get you scholarship money totaling $70,000 a year over the course of 3 years, in other words, $210,000 in scholarship money for 70 hours, that's $3,000 an hour that you're making in scholarships for studying for the LSAT this summer. So I don't know what your summer's looking like, but if you could find just an hour a day for 7 hours a week on average, it'd be worth it. And you could still take the August LSAT, your score comes back end of the month, you're applying to law school, the second application's open in September regardless. So the benefit of having this conversation now in mid-May is that your decision to retake doesn't even delay your applications at all if you could go for the August LSAT. So my question is, why wouldn't you do it? And it could be, I mean, yes, maybe you'll only improve 2 to 5 points, but you could improve more. And the possibility of improving 5-10 points means it's worth pursuing. And if you only improve a few points, so what? Like, it cost you $250 in the LSAT fee. It cost you 70 hours of studying. But the option, the possibility of making tens of thousands or 6 figures in scholarships means it's a no-brainer. And the particulars are going to depend on which law schools you're looking at and how much above the medians you are at any given law school. There's no one-size-fits-all answer in terms of how much money exactly it's going to get you. Another factor is if you're willing to negotiate your scholarships. In other words, they make you an offer. You send them one email asking for more. That bumps up the offer. It varies every year, of course, based on the school, and there's an element of chance in here, but of course, what I'm describing here is on the high end of what is possible, but I'm painting that picture to motivate and encourage you to go for it. And even if you ended up with half of what I mentioned, that'd still be worth going for. See a question, and Al Seldeep is asking, if I have 2 undergrads with a 2.48 GPA and a 3.8 GPA, should I submit both or only the highest? So you don't get to choose is the thing. You are applying with the first bachelor's degree that you earned. The first one that you completed is what counts. Might be unfortunate, but that's the deal. I don't make the rules, I just report them. So if the 2.48 is the first one, that's unfortunate. Hopefully the 3.8 was the first one. But regardless, it is what it is, and all you can change now is your LSAT and your essays and your resume and whatnot, your rec letters, but the LSAT's the big factor that you still have the room to impact. And so I hope it's a 3.8. I'm crossing my fingers for you that it was the first one, but if not, it's unfortunate. But good news is at least law schools, with rare exceptions, weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. So you've still got a lot of opportunity to boost up your odds for admission. Birch is asking, could I apply to law school in October? Yeah, I mean, you can. You can apply to law school virtually any month of the year. But there are deadlines and there are timeframes. Law school apps open in September, and the deadlines vary. So some law schools, their deadlines in February. For others, the deadlines in April or May. For others, there is no deadline, and they'll take people up to the day before it starts. They'll also take people off the wait list the day before it starts. Stressful situation, but it happens all the time. Now, October is relatively early in the cycle. I mentioned law schools their apps open in September. And so October is just the second month of applications, still very early in the cycle. And there are benefits to applying early because law school admissions is conducted on a rolling basis, meaning that law schools can evaluate applications in the order in which they receive them. When you apply earlier, it's a bit easier to get in because there are more seats available. There's also more scholarship money available. That being said, January and February are not too late, but it is a relative disadvantage to apply in January or February. I would avoid it if you could. And speaking now in mid-May, there is no reason that you couldn't apply in the fall on the earlier side. And so if you want some help putting together your LSAT action plan, making an LSAT study schedule, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Monday, because today's Friday. I'm off for the weekend. I'll be back Monday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for joining.